Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tour de Fabric's latest trunk show. We have a wonderful panel here with you, ready to start their talks. Each person is going to have just under 15 minutes to talk you through their work and their interests. And I'm not going to try and introduce them because they're going to do a marvelous job of introducing themselves. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth Whitehead, who will be leading the charge on this Tour de Fabric chunk show. Elizabeth, over to you. Let me share the deck here. And away we go. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Whitehead, and I am Windmill Quilts. I started, whoops, there we go. When I started it was just around 2019, I answered a challenge from Hoffman Fabrics using the hot air balloon panel. And the hot air balloon panel, when I saw it, I went, whoa, I recognize that place. This is the Rio Grande River right here in Albuquerque. So I created these two quilts, and as I started talking with Hoffman, they asked me, "Are you going to sell these patterns through a quilt shop?" And I said, "No, I think I'm going to do it myself." And that is the way that I started off with windmill quilts. When I started my little bitty website, I had two patterns. Now, working with Hoffman, Northcott, Studio E, the Japtex group, Henry Glass, even some Riley Blake in there. I have been busy just playing, having fun. These three, I had so many images to share, but I had to pick and choose and throw and pull and take them away. But I like to experiment with different sizes, shapes, and colors. So this one, the first one on the left here, is what I started with Northcott line, and it was a 24/7 line, and it had 24 colors in it, and I had to use every one. So that was Fish Days, which is the one on the left. The one on the right is Fishscape, which is a different with Northcott, changed the configuration, and the bottom one, the little guy on the bottom, is Uppity Fish, and where moved the fish around. But it's the same concept, half rectangles. Just I was curious to see how they would be put together, and I had a little bit of fun with this one. A good friend of mine quilted Fish Days. Fishscape is still under construction. Fish Uppity Fish will get around to it. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Okay, one of the things that I do a lot of are panel quilts. Everybody gets those beautiful panels and they don't know what to do with them. So I just take the panel, figure out what looks good with it, and keep on going. I'm going to be showing quite a few panel quilts, and because I love the panels, but I just don't like that there's nothing around them. Roja's Red Dream was, if you've heard of the Hoffman Big Dream series, the Dahlia, well, this one's the poinsettia. There's also a rose, and I think there's another one too. Trails End, they love to do a lot of photography in their quilts. And yes, I am a photographer, and I love to do landscapes, black and whites, and things like that. Celebration Stars, of course, I was thinking of a good friend of mine who loves the red, white, and blue, and she inspired the Celebration Stars. Toya Flats, of course, is the high desert, and Rusty's Run, of course, has horses. Uh, the trucks. Every year, Hoffman puts out a truck panel, and we have to do something with the trucks. So in 20, I think it's 5, 4, 3, 2. 2022 started the trucks. So I've done a quilt for each one of them. And the one on the lower right is this year's quilt. It's called Holiday Frost. And what I did, instead of recreating a whole new border section, I took one older one that I'd used for a Halloween pattern and just changed it up. And there you go, I got the trucks. One of the things that I'm constantly asked is if the panel is going up and down or left, or horizontal or vertical. So I took one pattern, the Mystic, what is it called? Oh, Mountain View, flipped it on the right. I just call it the right turn, and I turned this one into Sunset Ride. It's the same thing. Um, and it's amazing how they both look so different, but it's the same thing. That's one of the things I like to do is move the colors, move the fabrics in and out. Okay, onward. My favorites. These guys have been made, quilted, shown off, sold. The patterns, you can get them on my website, windmillquilts.net. And the one up on the upper left, and you have to excuse my great nephew's feet because he was the one holding the quilts up. Ted's Dynasty. And the only reason why it was named Ted is because my granddaughter walked in, looked at the turtle, and said, "That's a Ted." And I went, "Okay, there you go." Here in the Southwest, we have, of course, the high desert with these are saguaros, mostly in Arizona, Sonoran Desert. And the colors, the fabrics just had me do a Southwestern style. The black and white and yellow, it's actually three quilts, black, white, yellow, black, white, red, black, white, purple. But it was a different style of panel that I played with. And then the watercolor, I mean what do you call it? I forgot the name of this, but it's I wouldn't say the watercolor poppies, the dragonfly. That one has peanut, really, I can't remember the name of them, but anyway, that one's called Dragonfly Flower, and it that one's the one that has blown windmill quilts out of the water. I've never had so many requests for that particular one. It's it was just, hey, it happened. Let me go. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm trying not to use my mouse. Okay. I also do quite a bit of traditional style quilts. Um, Lux boho is on the left, Geopop pearl is on the right, Rainbow stars on the bottom. Now these three have had several renditions in different fabric lines, but it's the same shape, style, colorways, and changing up fabrics in the colors, or changing up colors in the fabrics, and but they've been very popular. The bottom one, the black one on the bottom, Rainbow Star, I taught as a retreat in Albuquerque last summer, and I do have images. Hopefully, we'll get up on the website of the folks that were at the retreat that did make the quilt. I had green, brown, yellow, soft pastels. I mean, they were all absolutely gorgeous. I mean, just warmed my heart to see other people making that one. And it's not a very big quilt, and it's quite cool to play with. More traditional style, like I said, I do a lot of traditional style. The one on the lower right was a mosaic line, and I kept thinking mosaic, something weird, something so. A friend of mine, my cousin and I went cruising around in Los Ranchos village in Albuquerque, and we found this gate, and this gate was just like that. So I just created one block, threw it in there, used the mosaics. I think I've got like 15 different renditions of color of that one, but my daughter was in Australia during the big fires, and she sent me a card that had the colors in it. And that was the one that I finally used. So that one's Mosaic Masterpiece or whatever. I can't remember the name of it, but and then I've got the marbles. When I made the marbles, I thought, ooh, I should have made this one a king size because it was gorgeous. Um, I like to play with the panels that have the little 8x8, 9x9 animals. I love to do things like that. So and then fussy cut and put things together. Okay, let's move on. One thing that was really, really special to me was this year or last year about this time, we got heard rumor that Quilt Folk magazine was going to be doing a New Mexico issue. In late September, I got an email asking me if I would consider being in the issue. And I was like, oh my God, yes. So in October, I was interviewed. All the photographers came out. We did all the they did all the photo shoots and everything. And the issue came out in January. So, like I said, I was very honored to be included with many amazing quilters here in New Mexico. Um, the one on the left, underneath the house, and that's my grandfather's house that he was born in, um, is the solid pins, little modern take. One in the middle, with the pottery, is Native Treasures. That's entirely block of the month applique. Me, I'm holding woven bells. And the judge on that one, it took a first place ribbon at the Albuquerque Fiber Arts Fiesta. And the judge on that one said that it amazing, beautiful curved piecing. After everything was all said and done, everything was signed, all the ribbons were awarded. We told the judge that it was entirely hand appliqued. The last one, of course, is the Mission Churches of New Mexico. And that was my first published pattern, the borders and sashing, the finishing kit for that. So that was the quilt folk. And since I've only got a few more minutes, my personals, the fan dance, the arrows and specks, and it had an oops because there's a discoloration, the crosses, the Peruvian crosses, and Grace. Um, Grace was in Better Homes and Gardens. What's the one where they do the shops? I can't remember. Shop Sampler. The sampler. It was into the fall issue in 2013. So that was Grace. And last but not least is the new endeavor that I'm working on now. I call it Future Eye Candy. And hopefully in the next few years, you might be seeing these on bolts. But that's me from Windmill Quilts. I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And my website is windmillquilts.net. Thank you for your time.
Wow, wonderful to think that you might have your own. Are these going to be panels or are these going to be like a continuous yardage?
Continuous yardage.
Gosh, wow, how exciting. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And now I'm going to hand over to Dara. So, Dara, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I wonder if there's any other Canadians out in the crowd. Okay, so how do
Uh,
I,
you should have slide control.
thank you.
There
This is,
you go.
all right. So I call myself the free motion quilting liberator. I'm also a life coach, but I started out with truly like helping women, and I have, anyways, we'll just go through the adventure. All right. So why do I quilt? This is the part where I used to get a little bit clumped. So this is my grandma Mary, and she died when I was 7, and she was a master seamstress. And and these are a row of, I think there's like 8 or 9 of them, and they were quilts for, there was a death of a hockey team in Canada. They were hit, they were in a school bus, they were going to a game. And so we made these quilts. But my grandma, that's what she did. She was, um, ah, I don't want to, I was like, I'm like, okay, get that out of the way. So I always feel connected to her when I'm quilting. And in fact, this is my first quilt. You can see it's well loved. I've actually renovated it. I've re-quilted it and I have to just put the binding on. But I went my first time abroad. I was 19 years old and I never experienced what it was like to live other places. And I remember flying over, I lived in Calgary at the time, and I looked down in the fields where many of my ancestors plowed for the first time, and I was like, I need to make a quilt. Like it was like in my soul. And this is before the internet. I didn't know what I was doing. Most of the seams, well, some of them match. I didn't know there wasn't rotary cutters, and I didn't really know about binding. You can kind of see it was like really wide and crazy. Anyways, so that was my first quilt, and since then I was like, I'm going to be really good at making quilts. I'm going to show people how much I love quilts and how much I love them. And so I started making quilts for my friends when they got married. I made quilts for people who had babies. And the problem was I didn't know how to quilt them. And so I would tie quilts and I would, use thicker thread and I would hand quilt them. But it's funny, I will go and visit those friends who had those quilts I made like 30 years ago, and they're like falling apart. And so I decided that I wanted to get really good. And I also would take my quilts to other quilters and I hated it. I was like, no, like I want to make this whole thing myself. And I'm a very independent girl. So I thought, well, how am I going to do this? So I got paper and I started doodling and I would, I just started figuring out how to do it. And eventually, so this was like a doodle that became then a beautiful quilt design. And you can see I had fun playing with the ladybugs and creating that. So and actually one of my tips about doodling is go get some U-Haul paper, get a clipboard, fold the U-Haul paper in half and then in thirds, and then just go for it. Another tip I have about doodling is buying a doodle, like just like a notebook. And then I do recommend when you're first starting, and actually never doodle with a pen. It's too fine of a tip. If you want like a felt tip, but when you're first starting, I do recommend that you just use like a Corolla, sorry, like a thicker one or something like this, like a Sharpie. Okay. That's going to glide more. You can also use like a chalkboard or a whiteboard. That will help. But what I like about using a doodle book is that you put the date on it and then you can see your progress. Okay. This is your creative journey. And so I just would like watch a TV show or a movie or just put music on and I would just let myself doodle. I then eventually got, all the fabric that your mother-in-law's brother's sister's wife or husband, like, I don't know, they died and they give you like all the stash and you're like, that fabric is so ugly, I'm never going to do anything with it. Get that fabric, get a bunch of that, that batting, the Franken batting, and just go for it. Just like and put music on or whatever it is and just practice, whether you have a domestic machine or a long arm, and just give yourself permission. And then this is the tip. You then take those swatches, like 20-inch swatch. You can put like your serger, you can serge the edges, and then you donate them to the local SPCA, and those can be used as pee pads for the animals. And now you feel like you're a good human. Right? The other thing that I do with those is I will use my rotary cutter and I'll make them into strips, and then I'll get a big piece of fabric that I get at the thrift store, and I'll make a dog bed. So I do that with all my leftover batting and all my scraps, when you're like trimming your quilts. I keep all of those and I stuff those into dog beds, and then I deliver those. So this is a way for us to reduce, reuse, and recycle. That's right. Animals don't care what the stitches look like. Another thing you can do when you're practicing is on the first one, you do like a yellow. And then the second time you do it, you can use like a red thread, and then you can use a blue thread. So you can actually be using that same fabric swatch, or like the quilt sandwich, I should say, and you can use it 3 or 4 times with different designs. Okay. So and then practice makes perfect. So this was one of those times where I was like, okay, I'm going to just cut up a bunch of circles. I'm going to play around with circles and designs, and I'm just going to let myself go for it, and have that contrasting thread. So eventually, as I got better and better, I was able to write these books, and I'm just so happy. And the first book is the 10 fundamental designs, because we're not memorizing things here. We're learning the design elements. So wouldn't that be so annoying if I was standing beside you and saying, oh, turn left, turn right. Oh, no, your feather. No, stop. Ah, right? Like that's not how it works. You have to know those design elements. And so as you learn, oh, I need to make sure when I'm doing my swirl, I gotta hit that one mark. I have to learn how that goes. And so that book is really helpful to actually learn how the work goes, how the design is. One of the tips that I always say to women is, or anyone who wants to learn, women or men, um, learn one design first and then get really good at that design, and then learn another design and get really good at that. And then they come together and they have a baby. And now you can do all these different designs. So this is my studio. This is where all the magic happens. So fun. Now I'm the crazy lady on the quilt on the street, which I will own that. So in my book, I just thought I would show some of these fun, and I have 5 kids, and so it's really fun for me to have them involved in the work that I'm doing. These are all from my book. Actually, this one, my husband gave this quilt away to one of his coworkers, and I was like, oh, I usually bring that with me for trunk shows. Oh, well, I can make another one. Um, all right, so get them involved. So this was a day where I was pretty stressed out, and I said to my husband, I just need 8 hours where I don't have to pick anyone up from school or do anything, and I just let myself play. And this was kind of a take. I love the prairies. I live here on Vancouver Island, which I love, but this to me was the prairies of the fields and the sky. So also I love making quilts, as I said, for gifts. And so just even having fun where I would just put a bunch of solid fabric on and play. Playing is one of the biggest things that I recommend to people when they want to learn how to do something, because if you're constantly criticizing yourself, you're never going to be successful. So here are some fun table runners that I actually gave away. Another thing that I do in my quilting practice is I run these quilts that I make for officers' families who have passed away in the line of duty. And so I have collaborations of women that will bring me the squares. I put them together and I send them out to those families. This is a quilt that I gave my sister many years ago, and it always warms my heart. And I'm so proud of myself. I did a label, even though it was a marker, it still works. So quilting is a form of love, functional creativity. Also, like I'm going to say, you just got to practice and have fun with it. The more that you can be creative and play, the less critical you're going to be to yourself and the more success you're going to have. This one was a collaboration. I love collaborating with fellow quilters. So she made the quilt top, and you can see I did a really fun job of playing with different elements. And then we ended up doing this as we sold tickets, and I was able to donate that money to a good cause. I also really love thrifting and rescuing this quilt. I'm making into a coat. And so it's one of the wool coats, and I have a vintage sheet on the backing, which is really fun. This is also a book from my book, quilt from my book, but I thought it'd be fun for you to see a little bit of Vancouver Island in the back. Playing with feathers. This is a quilt from a friend. This is a wedding quilt that I gave to a friend, and my niece got married. Like, she had to get married quickly because of she's Canadian, she married an American. And so I'm actually going to be timing how long it takes me. I'm doing one very similar to see how long it actually takes me to make a quilt. So if you want to follow me on YouTube, you could check out my adventure. Here's some more delicious texture. Here's another client quilt. I don't quilt for clients anymore. I spend most of my time life coaching. Here's my take on graffiti quilting. Here's another fundraiser quilt. So it's kind of a fun play on Dresden's. I have a bit of an obsession with Dresden's. Playing around with feathers, looking at them. Like I said, well, what would happen if I have a wider vein in the middle of that feather? And then I circled that feather. So I'm sorry, I circled the vein with the pebbles. Quilts in the wild. Take your quilts out. Take fun pictures. Go and play. Here's another one from my book. Another client quilt that was just absolutely gorgeous. Here's another one, a love for Dresden's. Another fundraiser quilt, another collaboration with a really skilled quilter who loves piecing. I don't love piecing. So that was fun to do that with her. You give quilts away. I love, this is when I was teaching at the event, the Garden of Quilts in Utah. a travel with quilts. This is just my recent trip in Iceland. So my daughter's friend who I knew her mom 30 years ago, and her mom passed away a few years ago. And so and she lives in Paris. So I was like, well, when in Iceland, you got to take some good pictures of the quilts. I love teaching quilting. I love empowering women. Here's a dress that I made out of a tablecloth. This is in Houston with Carolina Moore. This is me at QuiltCon in February. And this is a yo-yo quilt that I got for $40 on Facebook Marketplace that I decided to make into a skirt, which was super fun. And the blouse that I'm wearing was a tablecloth that I found at a thrift store, which I rescued, which was a really fun project. Here's another quilt rescue. This is Heather Roth's taking a picture. This is a quilt that I would have had to have taken apart because it was not square at all. So I made it into a dress. And so this is that blouse I talked about. Also, I love if you stain a sweatshirt or if the sweatshirt's kind of blah and boring, it's fun to put like applique things on. Here's one of my favorite sweatshirts, but I got a stain on it. So I put this fun block on it. And then here's another tablecloth that I made a blouse out of. These jeans, I put on some fun, more connections. Quilting is about connections and having friends. These are ladies I work with and helping empower them. That same quilt rescue. Also playing with different ideas, doing something unique. Like here's a quilt that I quilted and then I made some really fun ornaments and I sent them to friends and family. So I'm super proud of how far I've come. And I want to let you know that I am quilting or hosting another quilt summit. We did one in May. It was awesome. And it's Harvest Your Creativity this fall. And we're having a lot of really great instructors. And so we're still taking applications. So if anyone's here who is an instructor that would like to be a part of this incredible event, please let me know. You can message me, Dara at Dara Thomason, or support at Dara Thomason, and I would love to have you. All right, that's a bit of my journey.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That was absolutely fascinating. It's so lovely to see the family history there and you with your own family as well. It was absolutely lovely. So I'm going to hand over now to Andrea, and you're going to take it away and tell us all about yourself. Just remember to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, Bea. I'm thrilled to be here with Elizabeth and Dara. I am Andy Stanfield, True Blue Quilts. I am headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, and I've got my fingers crossed. We had rain in the forecast, which would be a wonderful event. So unfortunately, we've got nice, clear blue skies looking out my window. So you may recognize the block in the photo if you've watched my workshop. That is my stretched star. But I want to go all the way back to the beginning of my quilt journey in 2004. And I love pulling fabrics together. So this looks kind of chaotic, probably not the choices I would make now with 20 years experience, but I loved the animal fabric that you see in the border. And so I love to find a focal fabric and then pull coordinating shades. And I'm very eclectic. So you see big, bold florals, you see some small calico type prints and everything in between. It's all good, and throw it all in the mix and it'll be wonderful. So that's one of my very first quilts. And I found all that fabric at my mom's quilt shop because she had a fabric store as one of her retirement projects. And the quilt shop closed after about 5 years. And then we've been writing books together. So my quilting journey is definitely inspired by my mom. So some of the quilts in that monochromatic book are Blue River on the left and Orange Flowers on the right. We got very creative with names and they all, announce the color scheme. And you can see a little bit different style here. I designed the quilt on the left, pre-cut friendly, simple blocks, but I really let the fabrics and the colors shine in those. And of course, it gave me lots of room to play with my free motion quilting because I am also a long arm quilter. My mom, on the other hand, being retired, has much more time. She can do some of that more intricate applique that you see. So it's fun looking back through that book and then pairing up the quilts with the person. And so we definitely have design differences, but we get along and really enjoy sewing together. Another one of my monochromatic series called Yellow Suns. And these designs look beautiful in any color scheme. I actually saw someone make this in a kind of black, white, gray, more neutral color scheme, and it was absolutely stunning. So pre-cut friendly with 2-inch strips to make those squares, but very fun. Purple Angles is actually a foundation paper pieced quilt from the monochromatic book. Again, looks stunning in other colorways. I've seen a green version and some blues that were really, really pretty. And I love playing with color placement. I think Elizabeth mentioned this with her quilts. When you make different versions, you kind of move the colors around. And with this purple angle design, you can emphasize either the spikes going to the corners or that ring around the center and really have fun. We also push the definition of the color family there. You see, especially in the photography on the computer screen, a lot of pinks, but we were shopping our stash to put these quilt samples together. And so we did go to those very pinky mauve tones as well as some of the more blue-gray variations of purple. We collaborated again on a book called Angle Play the Easy Way. Angle Play is a set of templates that help you make a variety of sizes of half rectangle triangles. And you can see the cover quilt here in full is birds flying high with some traditional pieced elements as well as those half rectangle triangle making pinwheel designs. This is my favorite, very simple take on half rectangle triangles that turn into diamonds, and then playing with the colors. And I used the border color from the center to make the diamond in the next round. And then I found a print for that outer section in the middle ring and used that as the center of my outer diamond. So really fun to play with. And then again, in person, seeing the free motion quilting that I was able to put in all the negative space was really makes this one of my all-time favorite quilts. Winter Blues is a color variation of the 2x2 pattern from the Angle Play book. And again, just some different placement of the half rectangle triangles to form borders around the pinwheel squares and also to make some star blocks that kind of fade into that chain outer border, outer section of blocks. Again, color placement makes this quilt just sing in all sorts of different ways. So lots of fun to see those variations. Meteor is still following along that half rectangle triangle theme. And you can see how the block in the upper left is actually deconstructed across the quilt. We just take out some of the more complex elements until you're left with just the forepatch in the bottom right. So a little bit of modern twist there with the negative space playing around there and just moving those elements and subtracting things down to their core. For several years, I was an ambassador for Island Batik Fabrics, which is now Lumen Fabrics, still wonderful quality batiks. And as part of that program, I was creating a new quilt project every month with different fabric collections that they sent me. And so you can just see a huge variety of things that were going on, from Christmas projects down in the bottom right, some thread play for the tiger, using some AccuQuilt dies for the Storm at Sea. I did a patriotic version that you see there in the middle row, and just some other of my original designs. One of those is called Altair, and if you think back to my monochromatic images from the beginning, I love playing with ombre ranges of colors. And since I was instructed to use a specific fabric line, I had to kind of make my idea of an ombre background work with the fabrics they gave me, which were some pretty graphic prints there that may look a little jarring. You know, if I was going to make this quilt over again, I would do a little bit smoother fabric selection, pull some tone on tones that don't have quite as much contrast there. But this is a fun quilt. Paper piece, just that center shooting star portion, and then traditional piecing for everything else. Serpentine, I got to play with the New York Beauty block and try my hand at curved piecing there. Again, fulfilling the requirement to showcase a specific collection of Island Batik fabrics, and just what they had sent me, which didn't quite fill out the sections. So I mixed and matched and, you know, did a little bit of Frankenstein piecing there with the colors. Whereas if you were purchasing all the fabric, you could make those transitions a little smoother. So I probably shouldn't be quite as critical of designs. One of the habits that some friends and I are trying to implement is when you show off a quilt, all you do is say, ta-da! And you don't need to go into any explanation, but I do like to give you a little background on some of my design decisions as we are in the trunk show space. More recently, I was volunteering to run the Block Lotto program for the Phoenix Modern Quilt Guild, and I like to work under a theme or with a prompt. And the prompt I gave myself for this program was to use rectangular blocks. And I set a size for myself of 6 inches by 9 inches. And it was pretty simple the first month to put some half square triangles together to fit that 6 by 9 dimension. But this is an ongoing project. So I continued to work with that rectangular dimension. As you can see, that's where my stretched star came from, with half rectangle triangles. I took the churn dash block and stretched that out as well. I even came up with my own ruler to help me manage that size of block, make things a little bit faster and easier. And it eventually turned into a 12 block series, what I'm calling the Little Bit Different sampler. And you can see in this quilt, I took every block that I had come up with for the exchange program and put them together in one quilt. So the stretch star is there at the top left. I did a flower, a set of stripes, a bullseye block, a split 9 patch, some flying geese, the half square triangles on the second row, an applique heart, the churn dash, some zigzags, some improv curves, and then a square and a square, which then I needed to add something to make it a rectangle. So those are all the blocks in the original Little Bit Different collection. I have put some of them together in a pattern that I call Fast Track, and this is actually the pattern that I am using as a quilt along here in the Tour de Fabric event. And we are only halfway through the month, so you have plenty of time to come join us and finish this quilt up in July. So you can find my patterns at truebluequilts.com. I'm continuing to quilt a little bit different and add blocks to that collection of 6 by 9 inch rectangular blocks. And you can follow my progress on YouTube, because I do a live stream every Wednesday afternoon. and I'd love to have you join in sometime. So I've talked a little bit quickly here, B, but I will turn it back over to the group. If anyone has questions for any of us, we do have time for that.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Absolutely fascinating. And am I right? There's a coupon in the digital goodie bag for your ruler as well.
Yes, yes, as well.
And I know I've seen at least a couple of people posting in the community about being very happy with theirs, and your quilt along seems to be going marvelously as well.
Yeah, we're having lots of fun. So like I said, there's still time for people to join in.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, that means that it's over to me. So I should introduce myself, perhaps, as I'm the next one on the trunk show. It also means that I should start the timer for myself as well. Let me just do that so that I don't go horribly over, which I know I have done in the past. So there we go. So here I am. There is Bee Burn. I am a quilter. Have been for a long time, a maker for as long as I can remember. Originally from the UK and now living in California by way of Tokyo, where I also lived for a couple of years as well. And my thing that I have always absolutely adored is English paper piecing. So there's an example here that I was actually talking about in a panel earlier this week, which is the red and white Lucy quilt that I submitted to the 2017 San Francisco Quilt Girl show, which was great fun. And actually, I should won a ribbon for the first time submitting, which I was extremely excited about. Got an honorable mention on that. And this is a very traditional pattern designed by Lucy Boston called the Patchwork of the Crosses. And she was an English quilter in the 40s who was quite ahead of her time. But I've always loved English paper piecing, and I don't think it just has to be used on quilts. I think it's a great way to make fabric to use in other contexts. So the jacket I'm wearing here, which I was actually at the East Bay Heritage Quilters show, volunteering there during the pandemic. But this jacket is entirely English paper pieced. And that was all done by hand. All the hexagons are different sizes because I drew them all out on the pattern pieces and then cut them out. And had great fun making that and then assembling it and quilting it by machine. But I've continued to make other things using English paper piecing. On the left there is a sunglasses case. And these are some of the smallest hexagons I've ever done. With hexagons, you measure the size of the hexagon by the length of the side. So a 1-inch hexagon is kind of your standard to get started. But these hexagons in the sunglasses case are only 1/3 of an inch. So teeny tiny little scraps, and I've been able to fussy cut a lot of them as well, teeny tiny little pieces of paper. Whereas the other side of the screen on the right this is a picture of my sofa in its usual sort of haggard condition. And you'll see that when I took the picture, which I think was about a year ago, I was halfway through covering the sofa cushions in hexagon English paper piecing. I am still halfway through covering the sofa cushions, so those have not progressed. But the hexagons on the sofa cushions are 3-inch sides. The ones in the Hawaiian fabric cushion on the right are 2-inch or 2.5-inch, I think. And then the cushion is just a little 1-inch pentagon. So a 5-sided shape. It's like an ice cream cone shape. But when you put 2 of those ice cream cones together, you get a heart. And so I was quite obsessed by this pattern for a long time, made a full-size queen size quilt out of this, all hand stitched and hand quilted, and then also made a cushion and a bag and a few other things with that pattern as well. I do sew other things, and because I do so much with straight edges with English paper piecing, I really enjoy sewing curves when going by the machine. I had a clamshell ruler that was about, I think, either 10 or 12 inches across. and so made this lap quilt. Again, this was during the pandemic, and so it was all machine stitched, but then hand quilted with some big stitch quilting going on that, and then a lovely scrappy binding, which I really enjoyed around the edges. And then I also have messed around with Drunkard's Path in various different ways as well. And so the one on the right uses a line of woven fabrics, which I have to say are entirely unsuitable for doing a Drunkard's Path quilt, because we all know that fabric stretches most on the bias, and nothing stretches on the bias quite like a loosely woven fabric. So this was quite a challenge, and some of those fabrics did fray quite terribly, but managed to get it all finished and quilted last year. After it had kind of mellowed in a drawer for a little while with my frustration, and then used one of the fabrics from the collection as the binding and the backing. And again, more big stitch quilting on that. One of the projects that's taken a lot of my time over the last couple of years came out of a photo I took in Amsterdam, probably about 20 years ago. Living in the UK, as I did for a long time up until 2012, you're always very close to the rest of Europe. And so it's very easy to kind of travel around. Relatively easy at least. And the Keukenhof Gardens in Amsterdam are a must for anyone who loves tulips, and they're my favorite flower. And so I took probably about 300 photos the day that I visited. One thing I love to do is use the photos that I've taken as color inspiration for quilts. And in fact, the workshop that I have here as part of the Tour de Fabric is all about choosing color palettes without necessarily having to know any color theory. So the color palette that I took from this photo developed into a quilt, and the early stages of it are there on the right. I wanted to use a shape that I hadn't used before. So I used a relatively square shape. They're actually like little arrows or perhaps houses, kind of distorted pentagons. But I decided to put them together into pluses. And the interesting thing about doing this is, of course, that there are actually multiple ways that pluses tessellate, that they fit together. You can be off by half a block quite easily. So I was making this quilt in several pieces because it's a large queen size quilt, and didn't realize that some of the blocks were tessellating in the wrong direction until I'd done quite a lot of hand stitching, which was terribly frustrating. So that was definitely a lesson learned. But I'd taken the main colors from this photo, but then also thought about how I wanted some lights and the darks, and to make the lights really pop. So if I show you, this is the quilt in progress there on my living room floor. And then it more or less finished, or at least the piecing done on the other side. And this quilt, I had tried to play around with the idea of creating curved areas within the paper piecing, but I think the nature of the blocks and the placement I chose became a bit more straight edged than I'd originally anticipated. But it was a really interesting process, because rather than following the color placements in the photo, I decided to go completely abstract. And essentially, I made all the blocks in advance, and I knew the proportions of the colors that I wanted to use. And I went scrappy as well and was using all sorts of little tiny pieces. But then I kind of pieced them as I wanted to at the time. So it was, I don't know if there's a lot of improv English paper piecing around, but this is what this became. And this is the final quilt with rather not great lighting. I decided to applique the tulip onto it. I'm still not sure whether that was the right decision, but there it is. This was hanging in the San Francisco show earlier this year. I am a multi-hyphenate person, a multi-hyphenate crafter, and teach and create in all sorts of different mediums. Quilting is my first love, but I do also teach regularly UV resin, which is what the coaster on the top left is made from. which is a great medium that sets in minutes and is great fun to use. And then, of course, I also love making bags and purses as well. And we've got the Sew Together bag workshop coming up on July 26th, next weekend, which is free for all attendees of the Tour de Fabric. And that's what that rainbow weaving is on in that top middle. I also love embroidery, sashiko embroidery, bottom left, and also just making little purses with metal frames or zips or handles or whatever. And the wreath on the top right was a fun project. I decided to use up a load of vintage notions that I'd been given and create a wonderful year-round wreath for my sewing room. So here is a more recent project. This was exhibited at the Pacific International Quilt Festival last year and also at the San Francisco show this year, where it won a ribbon. The panel in the middle is a self-portrait and was made during the pandemic. It was probably one of my first pandemic projects that I started. And I think it's about 40 by 60 and was all hand sewn, of course, very scrappy. And then that one was hand quilted, and I decided that I wanted to vary the way that I quilted and dealt with the panel. And so rather than the rather daunting prospect of having to English paper piece multiple panels, which would have looked different in any case because I didn't have enough of the same fabrics, I decided to take a high definition photograph and get it printed at spoon flour on yardage. And so these other side panels, at the time, spoon flour could only print 44-inch wide fabric. I just heard at a guild meeting this week that they can now go broader than that on cotton sateen. So I may well look into that. But these are 44 inches across and so slightly smaller than the original. But here I was able to treat them very differently. And in some of them, I put a clear vinyl between the different pieces that I'd cut up. And on the one on the right, I was able to use safety pins to hold it all together. And these are all on the topic of mental health, which is something I've had to deal with throughout my whole life and is something I've often included in my quilts. These are a few sketches that I've done in English paper piecing, where essentially I took a piece of paper and drew what I wanted to go on there on the paper and then cut it out and pieced the pieces. Of course, it's very important when you're doing this to keep track of which piece goes where. Otherwise, it can get very confusing. But these are what came out of that. At the same time, I was fascinated by a woman in the UK who was doing something similar to the middle one. But it was very much how I had started English paper piecing when I was a child, because I had drawn my own hexagons without realizing that they were all supposed to fit together perfectly. And so it was a great kind of throwback to how I had originally started. I do still experiment, of course, with other things. And this was a quilt that hung in a show earlier this year. Unfortunately, I had to rush to finish it, which I fear shows. But there we go. As Andrea was saying, I should just say ta-da. And there it is. But this is actually a woven quilt. This isn't pieced. So I had 3 shades of ombre fabric and went for the width of fabric strips and then wove them together in triaxial weaving in 3 different directions, which fittingly, considering my mental health, is also known as mad weaving, which I thought was a very suitable name for it. Most recently, I've been experimenting with Kawandi, which I was able to go to an amazing workshop with Judith Epstein-Williams earlier this year. This is an amazing type of quilting, which has a beautiful history. And this is just a small piece that I made in the class. I'm now working on a much larger one in a palette of acid green and purple, and greatly looking to finish up on that one and start showing it off. My name, as I say, is Bee Byrne. Hopefully you've noticed that I've been around a little bit in the forum and on the emails since I'm the host of the Tour de Fabric. And here's where you can reach me on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you very much. So I think that is the end of everything. I managed to keep to time. Phew. Always worried I'll overrun. I just want to thank our amazing panel for joining us here today. The recording will, as usual, be up on YouTube, and you can find the details, the social and everything else of everyone that has been with us here today on their teacher pages on the Tour de Fabric website, which of course is at quiltandlearn.com. Thank you, panel, and everyone listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.